Your Honor, I would like to introduce Mr. Blankenhorn's book, The Future of Marriage. It is marked as DIX 956.
Hearing no objection,
No objection, Your Honor.
956 is admitted.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd also now like to publish to the screen demonstrative number 3, and in that connection ask you if you have edited any books on subject matters relevant to your testimony today.
Yes, sir. I thought there were 4. The Black Fathers in Contemporary American Society, which I co-edited with Obie Clayton and Ron Mincy, who were 2 prominent African-American sociology professors. The Book of Marriage, which I co-edited with Dana Mack, who worked with me at the Institute at the time. Promises to Keep and Rebuilding the Nest are both groups of essays which I co-edited, and each of these books is a compilation of scholarly essays examining the status and the future of marriage.
Have the books that you have written or edited been reviewed in any peer-reviewed academic journals?
Well, I counted up recently, and there were over 50 citations in peer-reviewed academic journals. And I believe there were reviews in 7, book reviews in 7 journals, including the Journal of Marriage and the Family and Social Family Relations, and those, the Journal of Family Relations being Journal of Marriage and the Family being the most prominent journal in the field of when it comes to sociology of the family. So yes, there were a number of reviews and also a number of citations in peer-reviewed journals.
And just to be clear, if I understand your testimony correctly, your book has been actually reviewed, and you say 7 times, but it's been cited over 50 times in peer-reviewed journals?
Yes, 7. 7 reviews, and I think about 53 citations of the work in peer-reviewed journals.
And has your scholarship ever been cited in any reported judicial opinions?
It's been cited 5 times in court cases, including by the California Supreme Court and the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court.
And were those citations in the same-sex marriage cases in those?
Both of the latter 2 were with respect to the same-sex marriage cases. Yes, sir.
I see on your CV you are a member of the National Commission on America's Urban Families. Could you describe that commission, please?
That commission was appointed by President George Bush, the 41st president, in 1992 to examine the state of America's urban families and to issue a report to the president. I was one of about 7 members. The chairman of that committee was then Governor John Ashcroft of Missouri. The vice chairman was former Mayor Annette Strauss from Dallas, and we met 5 or 6 times when we issued our report in January of 93, excuse me.
Have you ever served in any other advisory role to federal governmental officials?
I was asked during the President Clinton's administration, I was asked by Vice President Al Gore to work with him in a program called Family Reunion, which was focused on family issues. And it was a conference that the Vice President sponsored and chaired in Nashville, Tennessee, each summer during that period of time. And I was asked, I was one of a number of people to be asked by him to meet with him to help him develop the agenda and to participate in that conference. The theme at that conference that year was fatherhood.
And the National Fatherhood Initiative is listed on your CV. What is that?
That is a group that was founded by me and several other people in 1995, I believe, was the first time we had a meeting, 96 perhaps. It's to raise consciousness and to really, I guess, inform public opinion about the importance of active, involved fathers in the lives of children. I was the founding chairman.
Earlier in your testimony, you mentioned that you had done some speaking. Have you delivered lectures in academic settings?
Yes, I have, quite often over the years, yes.
And have these been on the subject matters that we're discussing now?
Marriage, fatherhood, family structure.
And have you been invited to participate in debates or panel discussions on the subject specifically of marriage or same-sex marriages?
Yes, I'd say quite a few times. I've had a chance to meet and engage in conversation on this issue with some of the leading proponents of same-sex marriage. Evan Wolfson, Andrew Sullivan, Jonathan Rausch, others.
So you've engaged in debates with them over the years on the subject matter?
Yes, sir. We try to call them conversations now, but yes, that's the issue.
And have you provided legislative testimony in these areas?
I believe I've testified either. I've testified 3 times before either a congressional committee or a state legislative committee on the subjects of marriage and fatherhood.
Thank you, Mr. Blankenhorn. Your Honor, I would like to tender Mr. Blankenhorn as an expert on the subject of marriage, fatherhood, and family structures.
Very well, voir dire.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Blankenhorn.
Hello.
We haven't met, but my name is David Boies, and I represent the plaintiffs. Now, you got a master's degree, and that master's degree was in history, is that right?
Yes, sir. Comparative labor history.
And you did a thesis for that master's?
Yes, sir.
And what was that thesis in?
Labor history.
And was it a particular subject?
Yes, sir. It was a study of 2 cabinet makers' unions in 19th century Britain, and it was published in a peer-reviewed academic book several years after I wrote it.
Now, peer-reviewed, you just said. What is your understanding of what a peer-reviewed publication is?
It's a publication that, prior to it being published, is reviewed by competitive persons, by competent persons, to give their views on whether or not, first, whether or not the article should be published, and then, if it should, whether it requires revisions.
Now, other than the thesis that you wrote on cabinet makers in Britain, have you ever had a peer-reviewed publication?
Yes, sir.
And what was that?
Well, I co-edited a book with O.B. Clayton and Ron Mincy called Black Fathers in Contemporary American Society that was published by Russell Sage Press. That was a peer-reviewed publication.
Anything else?
No, sir. To the best of my memory, that's it. Except it might be of interest to note that in my own organization, where over the past 20 years many of my pieces of work have been published, we have, to the best of our ability, instituted our own peer review process, and we've been very scrupulous about carrying that out because of our high regard for the entire process.
But you do understand that peer-reviewed, as is normally used...
I'm using it as it's normally used.
Peer review, as it is normally used, does not refer to something that you do internally. It is done by somebody independent, correct?
All of our peer reviews are done by external people that have no connection to the Institute or the work that we are doing.
And are you saying that those independent people peer-reviewed your work?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now I thought I had 2 pieces of peer-reviewed publication.
I thought that the import of your question was to exempt from our consideration things that were published by my own organization for reasons that you're implying, and I'm happy to stipulate that. Let's bracket that, huh? And just say that apart from anything that was published by my own organization, where you could question, if you wish, the integrity of the peer review process, although I think if you were familiar with it, you would not question it. But as an outsider, you may question it. Let's bracket that for a moment and just say everybody else. Huh? We're looking at 2 publications only.
Uh-huh. And those 2 publications didn't have anything to do with same-sex marriage or the effects of same-sex marriage, correct?
No, sir. Yeah, no, sir.
In other words, I'm correct.
You are correct. They did not.
Okay, thank you. Now, have you ever taught a course in any college or university on marriage?
No, sir.
And you've never taught a course in any college or university on fatherhood, correct?
No, sir.
And you've never taught a course in any college or university on family structure?
No, sir.
And you do understand that the fields of psychology, sociology, and anthropology are relevant to the subjects of marriage and fatherhood and family structure?
That is my understanding, yes, sir.
And you've never gotten any kind of degree in psychology, correct?
No, sir.
Or psychiatry?
No, sir.
Or sociology?
No, sir.
Or anthropology?
I think we could go through the whole list because I've enumerated for you all the degrees I have.
And you've never taught any course in any college or university?
I've never been employed by a university
any
or
capacity.
college in any way, ever.
Now, you said you had testified 3 times. Were any of those 3 times relating to the effects of same-sex marriage?
No, sir.
In preparation for your testimony, did you undertake any scientific study of what the effects of permitting same-sex marriage had been in any jurisdiction in which same-sex marriage had been permitted?
Specifically in preparation for my testimony, did I undertake such study? The answer would be, no, sir, I did not.
Okay. Independent of the preparation for your testimony, have you ever conducted any scientific study as to what the effects of permitting same-sex marriage were in any of the jurisdictions where same-sex marriage was permitted?
Well, I have undertaken a study of that question in the best way I know how. Whether or not it would meet your definition of scientific is probably something we might have to explore. I would be happy to tell you what I did.
Well, let me explore it. You are saying that you undertook an attempt to study the effects, or what the effects were, of permitting same-sex marriage in various jurisdictions where same-sex marriage was permitted. Is that your...
No, sir.
Okay.
No. I do want to say what I did, though,
Let
if I
me-
may
let-
be permitted.
Well, let me be sure I've got the answer to my question first. Okay, sir?
Well, I thought you were asking me, did I undertake, independent of this preparation from testimony, I thought your question was, did I undertake any effort to understand the likely consequences of adopting same-sex marriage? And I wish to tell you that I did.
No, and I'm sure you would like to answer questions that I'm not asking, sir. And you'll have a chance to do just that with your counsel. I would like you to listen to the question that I'm asking you, okay? Because I think your question kind of slided over a couple of words. My question was whether you had conducted any study in connection with your expert work or otherwise of the effects of permitting same-sex marriage in the countries where same-sex marriage was permitted. Now, that begins with a yes or no answer.
I don't think I'm able to answer that question yes or no, if those are my only 2 choices.
The question is whether you have attempted to study the effects of same-sex marriage in the jurisdictions where they have permitted. You have either attempted to do that or you have not attempted to do that. It very may well be that you have attempted to do something entirely different or related to it, but I'm not asking you that. You understand?
May I tell you what I did do?
I would like you to answer my question, sir. Now, do you understand what my question is?
No, sir, because...
Because if you don't understand my questions, anytime you don't understand my questions, just let me know.
I'm letting you know now.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me try to be as clear as I can. You are aware that there are some jurisdictions that have permitted same-sex marriage.
I am so aware.
Okay. Now, have you studied any of those jurisdictions to try and determine what the effects of permitting same-sex marriage in those jurisdictions has been subsequent to the time that same-sex marriage was adopted?
The answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
If by
As long as you answer yes, then I can begin to ask more questions.
I'm just afraid that you won't accept my definition of study. And I don't want to try to say something that that it doesn't meet your definition of study.
Well, I will explore that. I will explore that. But I would like to do it in an orderly way, all right? And the first thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to identify which jurisdictions you have in your interpretation of the word studied.
I've tried to pay attention. I've had to say some attention to the evolution of the of this phenomenon of same-sex marriage in the Scandinavian countries, and I've tried to pay some attention to the impact of same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. But what I was trying to say before is that I have not engaged in a scientific study where I find data and write up an article that would be published of that nature. I have not done those things. That's what I was trying to say. I have not done those things. I have just read articles and had conversations with people and tried to be an informed person about it, but that is really the extent of it. I haven't developed a methodology or a set of expert, findings about the topic that you're. I have not done that. The topic that you're asking me to address.
Okay. Your Honor, I would object.
The objection is that the witness is not qualified to opine on the subject of marriage, fatherhood, and family structure, correct?
Yes, and in particular with respect to the effect of same-sex marriage, which is what he's being proffered to do within those general subjects.
Mr. Cooper, any further foundation for the opinion testimony that the witness is prepared to offer?
Your Honor, if the court will permit the witness to testify, the court will observe and hear the foundation for his judgments and can certainly reserve judgment.
Well, I understand, and I may very well do that, but the question is whether you want to lay any further foundation for his expertise.
In these subjects of marriage, family structure, and fatherhood?
Yes, and same-sex marriage, as Mr. Boies.
And same-sex marriage. No, Your Honor.
Okay. The testimony is, of course, governed by the rules of evidence concerning opinion testimony, and in cases that the Supreme Court has laid down to guide the court in admitting such testimony, obviously the standards are different in the physical sciences than in the social sciences. Relevant to the social sciences, as I understand these standards that are adopted by the Supreme Court and the courts of appeal, the court looks to whether the work that the witness has done meets the standards of intellectual rigor using criteria such as those have been developed in Doerr case, the Doerr line of cases, whether the testimony is proffered on the expert's special skills and his special skills as opposed to the insights of an intelligent layman, whether the proffered testimony will assist the trier of fact to understand or determine a fact which is at issue in the case. And with respect to Mr. Blankenhorn's qualifications, were this a jury trial, I think the question might very well be a close one. But this being a court trial, I am going to permit the witness to testify, and as Mr. Cooper has suggested, to weigh that testimony in light of the witness's qualifications, his background, training, experience, and the reasons that he offers for his opinions. So you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Blankenhorn, what is marriage?
Marriage is a socially approved sexual relationship between a man and a woman.
And on what do you base that opinion?
I base that on the broad consensus findings of the scholars, principally from the field of anthropology, but others as well, who have carefully sought to investigate this question in the modern world.
And what does marriage do?
Marriage does a number of things, but the most important thing it does is regulate filiation. It establishes who are the child's legal and social parents.
And on what do you base that opinion?
On the same body of evidence, the views that have been drawn from scholarly investigations, principally from the field of anthropology, but elsewhere as well, spanning across the modern era of scholarship.
Your Honor, I would like to publish to the screen demonstrative number 4 and now present the witness's testimony and his expert opinions, which have been disclosed, of course, to the plaintiffs. And for the purposes of the record, Your Honor, I would like to read into the record proposition number 1 and then ask the witness questions about it.
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Beg your pardon?
It's a leading objection, and I think it's a well-taken objection. Maybe you could just jump right into the subject.
Well, Your Honor, I would be happy to do that. Although I have to say that the plaintiffs led their witnesses throughout the course of the presentation of their case. And on the one occasion when we objected to it, we recognized that it moved at the pace of
It does move things along. I will let you do some leading, but rather than simply reading from the demonstrative and then asking the witness whether or not he agrees with this or doesn't agree with that and so forth, it might be helpful if you were to just take him through it in a more traditional manner.
Very well, Your Honor. Mr. Blankenhorn, what is the primary purpose of marriage in human groups?
We're embodied as male and female. That's the basic division in a species. We reproduce sexually. We don't, well, you know, that's how we reproduce. And the marriage is the social institution that rests upon those very primary biological facts. In fact, the famous anthropologist, recently deceased, but very, very famous anthropologist, Claude Lévi-Strauss, once described marriage as a social institution with a biological foundation. And this is really what he was referring to. He was saying that in across societies, that we have an interest in having it be, insofar as we can make it so, that the man and the woman whose sexual union makes the child, who are the biological creators of the child, that those same two individuals are also the social and legal parents of the child. And there's only one institution in the world that performs the task of bringing together the three dimensions of parenthood. Biological, the social, that's the caring for the child, and the legal. That institution is marriage. We think of it in a way, if you don't mind the poetry, we think of it as a gift that we give to children. We say, you, as a child, are being given this gift of being able to know and be known by the two people who brought you into this world. So this question, this word filiation, or the word affiliation, who is the child affiliated with, that, according to the scholars, has been the primary cross-cultural purpose of the institution. If it wasn't, if that need was not there, we likely would not have the institution at all. So, marriage does numerous things. There are numerous dimensions to it, of course, and it changes historically, and it evolves over time, and there's great diversity. But the wonderful finding from the scholars who looked at it is that it always is primarily organized everywhere around the globe to achieve this goal of giving the child, of uniting the biological, social, and legal dimensions of parenthood, in fixing that, because we know how important this is for children. I mean, that's really the main rationale for why we have the institution.
What is the significance of the fact that marriage is a cross-cultural, as you put it, institution and exists everywhere?
The fact that it exists everywhere, or at least nearly everywhere, I think suggests just how important the need must be. Because marriage can look very different in different places, different times. But what's so astonishing about this is that it's always doing this thing, east, west, north, south. 1,000 years ago, today, it's doing this thing. So this thing must be pretty important. It must be pretty fundamental. It must be at the very species level, critical to the society's success. It's not just one thing among many, and so forth. Because of its universality in the midst of diversity, I think that's a good piece of evidence to suggest the absolutely fundamentally important nature of the need that is being addressed singularly by this institution.
When you said earlier, this thing, I just wanted to be clear. What do you mean when you say marriage addresses this thing?
Well, the need for the child to know and be known by the two people, to make it as likely as we can that the biological parents are also the social and legal parents. And that's what I mean by the thing.
Mr. Blankenhorn, I'd like you to turn to tab 3 in your binder, and would you please identify that document?
This is from a book by Suzanne Fraser called Varieties of Sexual Experience, and she's quite a prominent anthropologist.
And now I would like you to invite your attention to page 248, which is the only page excerpted behind the tab there, and it's specifically to the second full paragraph. And if you will, please, Mr. Blankenhorn, would you read the first 3 sentences as I count them?
Certainly. My own definition of marriage derives from a review of the careful attempts to define it made by other social scientists, for example, Goff and Goodenough, as well as from my analysis of ethnographic reports of marriage in a variety of societies. I have found that I can most consistently and usefully identify marriage in cross-cultural context by using the following definition. Marriage is a relationship within which a group socially approves and encourages sexual intercourse and the birth of children.
Is this among the scholars that you've previously cited and on which you rely for your opinion in this subject matter?
This, because of her expertise and also because of its because of her expertise and also because of its consistency with many, many others.
Your Honor, I would like to introduce plaintiffs. This is Plaintiff's Exhibit 1626 into evidence.
1626.
That's what I see here.
Plaintiff's Exhibit 1626 has additional pages.
And I am happy to have additional pages placed in the record.
Now, I don't know how many pages, but whatever 1626 is, we have no objection.
There's no objection. All right, 1626 is in.
A lot more than one page, I know that.
All right.
I have just excerpted here one in the binder. And would you please now turn to the document behind tab 4, Mr. Blankenhorn?
It's a history of marriage systems by Robina Quayle, who is a historian.
Okay. And would you turn your attention, please, to page 2 of the pages that are excerpted here? And in particular, I invite your attention to the 4th paragraph on the page. If you read the 2 sentences that begin that paragraph, if you would, please.
Marriage, as the socially recognized linking of a specific man to a specific woman and her offspring, can be found in all societies. Through marriage, children can be assured of being born to both a man and a woman who will care for them as they mature.
Is this among the works on which you relied to form your expert opinion?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would like to move this into evidence. This is DIX 79.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, DIX 79 is admitted.
Now, turn to document behind tab 5.
Oh, this is from the very distinguished sociologist Kingsley Davis, whose book he edited is called Contemporary Marriage. And this is from his introductory chapter to that book.
And if you'll turn to page 5, please.
Yes, sir.
In the second full paragraph on that page, would you please read the first 2 sentences?
Granted that the unique trait of what is commonly called marriage is social recognition and approval, one must still ask, approval of what? The answer is that it is approval of a couple's engaging in sexual intercourse and bearing and rearing offspring.
And have you relied on this work in forming your opinion?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would like to introduce this exhibit as well. It's DIX 50 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well.
Proceed now to tab 6, Mr. Blankenhorn.
Oh, this is from the 1951, which is the 6th and final edition of a book, a publication called Notes and Queries on Anthropology. It's put out by the Anthropological Institute of Great Britain, which is widely considered to be the most respected group of anthropologists in the world.
And if you'll turn to page 71 of that document, and the first full paragraph, if you'll read that sentence, please.
I'm going to say that another thing that's interesting about this book, despite its kind of banal title, is that this is a dictionary and a field worker's training guide. These are concepts that are used from senior anthropologists to train young anthropologists as they go into the field for their work, and a lot of it is providing definitions. And here's what they say on marriage. Quote, the family in this sense is based on marriage, which is defined as a union between a man and a woman such that children born by the woman are recognized as the legitimate offspring of both partners.
And you relied on this as well?
Well, this is probably the most famous definition of marriage in the history of anthropology. Yes, I did.
And, Your Honor, I would like to move this exhibit, which is a DIX 7-3, as well into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, 7-3 is admitted.
And if we could proceed to the document behind tab 7.
Oh, it's a book called Human Family Systems by Pierre Vandenberger, published in 1979. He's an anthropologist.
And who is Mr. Vandenberger?
He's an anthropologist.
Okay. Will you turn your attention to page 46 of that document?
Mm-hmm.
And at the bottom of the page, the last paragraph, read the 4 sentences there, beginning that paragraph into the record.
Here I shall argue that while all this is true, marriage is nevertheless the cultural codification of a biological program. Marriage is the socially sanctioned pair bond for the avowed social purpose of procreation.
And you relied on this source as well?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would like to move this document marked as DIX 8-9 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
8-9, DIX 8-9 is admitted.
Now, the document behind tab 8, if you'll describe that, please.
Yeah. This is from a book called Sex, Culture, and Myth, published in 1962 by Bronislaw Malinowski. Malinowski is, I think, widely and fairly viewed as the father of kinship studies in anthropology.
Oh, what, sir?
The father of kinship studies. The study of kinship.
Kinship.
Kinship, yes, sir.
And if you'll turn to page 11 of that document, the first line's on the page.
First line's bad. We are thus led at all stages of our argument to the conclusion that the institution of marriage is primarily determined by the needs of the offspring, by the dependence of the children upon the parents.
And you relied on this authority as well in forming your opinions?
I made a pretty close study of Malinowski because of his importance in the field. Yeah. So, yes, sir.
Your Honor, I would like to introduce as well this document, which is DIX 6-6, into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, 6-6 is admitted.
If you'll turn now to tab 9, no, I beg your pardon, tab 9 has been left empty. Let's skip to tab 10.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is a 1985 book called The View from Afar by the anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss.
I think you mentioned him earlier in your testimony.
Well, he is one of the giants in the field.
And on page 40 and 41, if you'll turn to those pages.
Yes, sir.
At the bottom of the page on 40, if you'll read the passage that begins, the family.
Yes. The family, based on a union more or less durable but socially approved of two individuals of opposite sexes who establish a household and bear and raise children, appears to be a practically universal phenomenon present in every type of society.
And you relied on this authority as well.
Yes.
Your Honor, I would like to move into evidence this document marked DIX 6-3.
No objection, Your Honor.
6-3 is admitted.
Now, are these the only authorities on which you have studied in in your examination of the issue of marriage?
No, these are what I view as representative. I'm not saying that every other person who's ever written about this agrees with what these people are saying, but I view these as representative of what the leading people in the field have concluded about the meaning of marriage. And what marriage is, I view these as representative. And I don't know how many we have discussed today, 5 or 6, but you could multiply it by 10, and you could get 50 or 60 distinguished people saying, in effect, this exact same thing.
And what conclusion do you draw from your review of these and other similar authorities in these fields?
Well, my conclusion is that they are correct, that this is what marriage is, and that this is its primary role and contribution to society.
Is there an opposing view? Is there an alternative view of marriage's purpose?
Yes, there is, and this view is significant, and this opposing view is, I think it's fair to say, also of significantly a more recent vintage and more recent prevalent, but it is certainly a well-developed and opposing view about what marriage is.
And what is that?
Well, this view is that marriage is fundamentally a private adult commitment.
And on that subject, would you please turn to the document behind tab 11 of your binder?
Yes, this is from a report called Beyond Conjugality, Recognizing and Supporting Close Personal Adult Relationships. And it was published by the Law Commission of Canada, a distinguished group of Canadian legal professionals, in 2001.
And what was the purpose of the publication of this document?
To offer to make analyses and to offer recommendations regarding marriage and family law in Canada.
And was this in connection with Canada's adoption of same-sex marriage?
Well, I would not say that this report was concerned primarily with that topic, but it was certainly concerned with that topic. It was one of the issues that the report addresses.
Would you turn your attention to page Roman 18?
I got it.
And on the what appears to be the first full paragraph there, or the first indented paragraph in the middle of the page, would you please read the material that begins with the second sentence?
The state's objectives and underlying contemporary regulation. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm going to start again. The state's objectives underlying contemporary regulation of marriage relate essentially to the facilitation of private ordering, providing an orderly framework in which people can express their commitment to each other, receive public recognition and support, and voluntarily assume a range of legal rights and obligations.
And does this statement reflect the view you've described previously as the private adult commitment view of marriage?
Yes, sir. And I believe it's significant because it was developed in somewhat precise language by a group of prominent lawyers who were pretty, I think, determined to say what they actually meant.
Now, turn to tab. That's not always the case with lawyers.
Well, I didn't know that would get a laugh.
If you would turn to the document behind tab 12, please.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Your Honor, was this introduced?
I did not introduce it. I'm happy to do so.
I think think so, since it was read from.
Sure. This is, Your Honor, is,
It's DIX 93.
yes, yes.
Is there an objection?
No objection.
All right. You're still offering 93?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. 93 submitted.
I'm sorry. The document behind tab 12 again.
This is an article by Professor Crispin Sartwell, who he teaches at Dickinson College, and it's an article that appeared in the, I believe, the Philadelphia Inquirer.
And if you'll read the from the first paragraph there in the second sentence.
Marriage. Marriage is sometimes referred to as an institution, but that's an odd application of the term. The Department of Defense is an institution. The University of California is an institution. Marriage is a private arrangement between parties committed to love.
And you relied on this as well for your opinion on the subject.
Yes, sir. My understanding of this is that it's a more colloquial way of restating exactly the views offered by the Law Commission of Canada as to the purpose of marriage.
Your Honor, this is DIX 84, and we would offer it into evidence now.
No objection.
Very well. 84 is in.
If you will now turn to the document behind tab 13 of your binder.
Yes. This is from a book called The Case for Same-Sex Marriage. It was written by Professor William Eskridge, whose views were discussed earlier today. He's a law professor from Yale University.
Is he one of the individuals you mentioned that you have been invited to debate on this subject of same?
Yes, sir.
Would you turn to page 11 of that, and essentially in the middle of the first full paragraph, beginning with "in today's society," would you read that, please?
In today's society, the importance of marriage is relational and not procreational.
And are there other authorities that you have studied that articulate this adult-centric view of marriage as you described it?
The view that marriage is fundamentally a private adult commitment, yes, sir. There are very, very many examples of this conclusion being proffered in the public discussion and in the academic discussion. And these are merely, very few of the many, many possible representative examples of this proposition.
And do you believe that this adult-centered view of marriage is an accurate view of the institution of marriage today and in the past?
No, sir, I do not believe it's accurate. I believe that the effective private dimensions of marriage are often, and including in our own society, a dimension of marriage, even an important dimension of marriage, but I do not believe that it has ever been I do not believe that in the history of societies it has been understood to be the sum and substance of marriage. The heart and soul, the core, the fundamental thing itself could be encapsulated with this idea that marriage is a fundamentally private adult commitment. I do not believe that's consistent with the human record.
I think you used the words, the private effective dimension of marriage. What did that mean?
It just means that the tender feelings that the spouses have for one another, the feelings of love and regard and solicitude and emotional commitments that and feelings of commitment and obligation and love that the spouses feel to one another. I'm using the term affective dimensions of marriage. And that dimension in many societies, of course, is very negligible. There are many societies where most marriages are arranged or they're governed by kin groups. In some societies, the affective dimension is not, it's a very negligible dimension of the institution. But in ours, of course, that is not true. In our Western tradition in the United States, the affective dimension is an important dimension and one that we celebrate on Valentine's Day and so forth. But it is never, the idea that that is what marriage is, that's how we understand the institution, is, I think, first of all, what these analysts are saying. And I think they're incorrect. They're incorrect. As a matter of our history and our lives, I think they are incorrect in that assertion. They may, as a question of what they wish would happen in the future, that's one question. But if we look at actual lived experience of marriage in human groups, this is not an accurate analysis, in my view.
Now, I'd like to ask you a few questions about why marriage regulates filiation, as you put it. And I would like to publish to the screen, Your Honor, demonstrative number 7. Mr. Blankenhorn, what role has religion played in defining the traditional institution of marriage?
Well, if we start with the question of the customary man-woman nature of the marital institution, the idea that marriage brings together the man and the woman, I think the record is completely clear that this concept, which we know now, or as I am saying, is a universal or nearly universal presence in human societies. This feature of marriage simply is not the creation of religion. It is not something that religion invented. It does not depend upon religion for its rationale or its people having allegiance to it. Its evolution in our species cannot be explained with reference to religion. And that fact is borne out by us realizing that marriage is a natural human institution. That is, it concerns itself with natural facts, not supernatural facts. And it exists in societies that have monotheistic, belief-based religions, societies that believe in what we in the West might call magic or witchcraft. You know, the variety of beliefs about the supernatural in the human experience is breathtakingly diverse. And yet, in all of these societies, the man and the woman form something called marriage. And it simply is erroneous to imagine that this foundational aspect of the institution is the artifact of a particular religious doctrine or a religion generally. And I further believe that what I have just said is non-controversial amongst scholars. I simply do not think that this is a controversial statement among people who have looked at this.
You don't disagree, do you, that marriage is sacred to many religions, modern religions?
Well, of course. I mean, marriage, religion is a very powerful influence in human affairs in all areas of life, and marriage is no exception. And so, for example, in so many societies, we see that individuals who marry, they believe that the promise is, in part, a sacred promise. They believe that they are promising something to God or to a higher power in addition of the promise to the spouse. And many people have a religious, the marriage ceremony occurs in a church or in a synagogue or a mosque. And so, of course, and sometimes religious officials are also agents of the state in actually legally perform the marriage, legally performing the marriage. So there is, in these and many other ways, and many people draw from religion the inspiration to live up to the calling of the marital vocation, and so forth. So with these and other ways, there is a strong sense, certainly in our nation, and I would say generally across the world, there is this interconnection, or this, I guess you might say, this strong influence of religion on this dimension of life. Now, you might call marriage, in so many societies, a religiously informed institution in some ways, but I'm trying to make the distinction between that and saying that the thing itself, the marriage institution itself, particularly its man-woman basis, which is universal. I mean, I'm trying to be very clear that this does not derive from religious doctrine. It does not derive from the concept of religion. It does not derive from any ideas about the supernatural. It is what scholars call a natural institution. It derives from facts of our embodiment and reproduction that do not call upon supernatural beliefs for their coherence.
Do you believe that the customary man-woman definition of marriage is attributable to, in some fashion or some way, to anti-homosexual prejudices or hostility?
I do not. I believe that homophobia is a real presence in our society, and I'm pretty confident in many, many other societies around the world. And I regret and deplore it and wish it to go away. And I have sought to look at the reasons for the evolution of marriage in human societies, as I've sought to understand and wrestle with the evidence about why marriage evolved in the first place, how it became institutionalized through law and custom, how it became universal in its reach and impact, and how those custodians of the institution over time, across time, and around the world have sought with words, both written and oral, to state the reasons for the institution, the purposes of the institution, the goals of the institution that the thing was trying to do, and why it mattered so much. I'm not able to find any evidence that animus toward gay and lesbian people, or that hatefulness towards homosexuality, homosexual persons. I'm not able to find evidence that there was a central component of how they understood their activities, how they understood their commitment to the marital institution, why they justified their participation in the marital institution, or why they established the laws and customs surrounding the institution that they did. Now, I'm not saying that no such evidence exists, and if such evidence exists, I would welcome. I want to know it, but I'm telling you that I have looked for it, and I cannot find it.
Well, return now then to your earlier testimony that marriage is designed, I think as you put it, to regulate filiation. Why does it matter whether the child is raised by his own biological parents?
Well, it matters for two large clusters of reasons, and I'll just go into this very, very briefly. But the first one somewhat accords with our common sense understanding of things. But the scholars have given it a name called kin altruism. And it really means, you care a lot about who you are related to. You care about your relatives. You care about who your parents are and who your child is. And you would be, they have measured this with great precision. You typically sacrifice more for people to whom you are related. You typically extend yourself, whether it's risking your life or loaning money or inconveniencing yourself on their behalf. Now, they have really looked at this fairly carefully, and this notion of kin altruism means that in humans, because we seem to care a lot about where we came from physically, and we seem to care a lot about the people to whom we are related, particularly closely related, so that if you have a child to be cared for if you had your druthers, and you would, for this reason, you would want, if you wanted what was best for the child, you would want that child, other things being equal, of course, you would want that child to be cared for by the two individuals who are the most closely related to that child. And that would be the mother's father, the child's mother and the child's father. And, of course, that's how we humans have organized ourselves for millennia now. The second body of evidence on this concerns child outcome studies, and here we shift now to the field principally of sociology. And we're not looking at motivation. We are not looking at the self-sacrificing nature of kinship. We're just looking at outcomes for the children. And here, there's a very large body of literature. My organization has been quite involved in this kind of work now for 20 years. And there's many, many others, scholars and researchers who have pursued this quite carefully. And I would say that there's a broad consensus among the scholars in this field. And I would further say that this consensus grows stronger almost every year because of the accumulating weight of evidence that the optimal environment for children is if they are raised from birth by their own natural mother, who is married to their own natural father. And of course, one wants to say that this isn't always possible. Sometimes this family form fails. Sometimes alternative family forms are different than that succeed. When we get to the level of specificity and individual cases, there's quite a bit of complexity to the situation. And the scholars have spent many years and many efforts trying to tease all of this out. But if you just look at the weight of evidence and you look at the most distinguished, well, I think among, I believe, the most distinguished scholars in this field, they are increasingly clear and emphatic that based on the available evidence today, it is clear that the optimal outcome for children in terms of outcomes, whether it be the likelihood of living in poverty, whether it be the likelihood of mental and emotional distress and suffering, whether it be juvenile delinquency or educational achievement or occupational success or the likelihood of experiencing abuse and neglect, that across the range of outcome measurements, that this family form of the two biological parent married couple home in a stable marriage is the best model from the child's point of view.
In that connection, I'd like you to turn to the document behind tab 15 in your binder. Will you identify that document when you've reached it?
Thank you. Thank you. This is a summary of the form of a research brief of research carried out by a group of scholars, a group of 3 scholars from Child Trends. This is a nonpartisan research group in Washington, D.C., and this brief, this summary of research was published in, I believe 2002, and it's called Marriage from a Child's Perspective.
Would you turn to page 6, please?
Yes.
And in the right-hand column, about halfway down the page, the paragraph beginning first, would you please read that for the court?
Research clearly demonstrates that family structure matters for children, and the family structure that helps children the most is a family headed by 2 biological parents in a low-conflict marriage. Children in single-parent families, children born to unmarried mothers, and children in step families or cohabiting relationships face higher risks of poor outcomes than do children in intact families headed by 2 biological partners. Parental divorce is also linked to a range of poorer academic and behavioral outcomes among children. There is thus value for children in promoting strong, stable marriages between biological parents.
And was this among the research that you have consulted and relied upon in arriving at your opinions in this matter?
Yes, because of the reputation of the child trans scholars, because it was a summation of work done by a number of them over time, and because, well, I'll stop there. Yes, but yes, it is.
Your Honor, this document is already in evidence, is my understanding.
Very well, 26 is in.
Turn now to the document behind tab 16, please.
Sure. Oh, this is a book called Growing Up with a Single Parent. It's by Sarah McClanahan and her colleague Gary Sandifer, and it was published by Harvard University Press in 1994. McClanahan is one of the most prominent family sociologists in the country. She teaches at Princeton.
Please turn to page 1 of the document, and in the second full paragraph, the third sentence, will you read that sentence to about the middle of the paragraph, please?
Okay, we have been studying, yeah? We have been studying this question for 10 years, and in our opinion, the evidence is quite clear. Children who grow up in a household with only one biological parent are worse off, on average, than children who grow up in a household with both their biological parents, regardless of the parent's race or educational background, regardless of whether the parents are married when the child is born, and regardless of whether the resident parent remarries.
And was this document among those you have relied upon?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, this too is in evidence already?
Very well.
Mr. Blankenhorn, does the customary man-woman definition of marriage benefit only the child?
Well, it certainly benefits the child, but it also benefits the mother and the father and society as a whole. The mother, because it lessens the likelihood of her having to raise the child alone and isolated. The father, because it connects him to his own child and to the mother of his child. Connects him to the process of generativity in a way that would be unlikely for him to achieve any other way. And society as a whole, because these are the family units that are most likely to produce good outcomes for children and thus be the kind of seed beds from which come good citizens and people who are, more likely to be, positive contributors to society. And so it's a human, a kind of a human capital question. Yeah? It's the highest level of investment that we can make in children is to give them the great gift, really, of growing up in this family form. It doesn't guarantee success, and growing up outside of this form certainly does not guarantee failure. But it shifts the odds in a very dramatic way that has been carefully documented by the scholars.
I'd like you to turn now to the concept of a deinstitutionalization. I would like to publish to the screen, Your Honor, demonstrative number 8. Mr. Blankenhorn, could you please describe this concept of deinstitutionalization?
It's a term that comes from sociology. It has scholars who study it. There's a literature on it. The first paper I ever worked on at the Institute, the first paper that I ever worked on at the Institute was called Marriage in America. It's published in 1995, and it centered in part, on large part, on the concept of deinstitutionalization. I wish it was a prettier word to say or listen to. But what it really means is you have an institution which can be briefly defined as a relatively stable pattern of rules and structures intended to meet social needs. this is what, in brief, we think of when we think of a social institution. Marriage is is one social institution. The concept of deinstitutionalization is when, well, to speak briefly, that institution weakens. That institution becomes frailer. Its rules become thinner or removed altogether, and therefore the rules that govern the institution become less comprehensible and clear, and therefore less authoritative. And when its structures become less stable, less able to give robust shape to the institution, it's like a kind of shrinking process. And as a result of deinstitutionalization, you don't have to think about marriage. You could think about, a baseball team or a museum or any institution. When you take away its rules and you weaken its structures, scholars say that you're seeing deinstitutionalization. And so that the people, the participants in the institution, or the possible participants in the institution, become over time less loyal to it, less, they understand it less. Some of them, they increasingly, the institution loses esteem in the society. It loses respect. It loses its sense of being held in high regard, and the institution becomes less and less able to carry out its contributions to the society. Now, this concept of deinstitutionalization is, I think, a critical one for people who are studying the status and the future of any institution. But in particular, it has been of great value to scholars looking at recent trends in marriage, because in the United States, particularly in recent decades, the last 3, 4, 5 decades, there has been a marked process of deinstitutionalization of marriage, with very numerous and serious consequences for children and for the society as a whole. So it's an absolutely pivotal concept. And if we want to understand what the institution, if we want to understand where the institution is going and what opportunities we may have to come to its aid.
I think you did just now testify to the institution of marriage has been weakened. I think to paraphrase your testimony, by deinstitutionalization already. What are some of the manifestations of that process?
Well, if you look, for example, at rates of out of wedlock childbearing, 5 or 6 decades ago, only a small fraction of U.S. children were born to unmarried parents, whereas the most latest data tells us that today about 38% of the children in the United States are born to unmarried parents. So that over, say, a 5-decade period, if you go back to 1960, that would be a very dramatic example. Well, that rate of growth over a 5-decade period, I think, constitutes a very dramatic example of the weakening of the marriage institution. Well, you also need to look at rates of divorce. The United States has probably the highest divorce rate in the world. And so, as a result, people are the weakening of the ideal of marital permanence suggests a lessening loyalty to the institution, and the rise of non-marital cohabitation, the increasing mainstreaming of third-party participation in procreation and artificial assisted reproductive technologies that disturb the bond between disturb the biological bond between the genitor and the child. And last, but for our purposes certainly not least, the spread of the idea and reality of same-sex marriages in the view of, I think, in the view of leading scholars, is another aspect or manifestation of this current trend of deinstitutionalization. And I meant to say, just for our purposes today, heterosexuals, heterosexuals did the deinstitutionalizing. I mean, if we go back and look at the trends I described, it's very clear that this was not. Deinstitutionalization is not something that just cropped up a few years ago whenever we began discussing the possibility of extending equal marriage rights to gay and lesbian people. It predates all of that. But what I'm saying is that the scholars are telling us that the process of deinstitutionalization would be furthered and accelerated significantly by adopting same-sex marriage.
Well, what impact, in your opinion, would redefining marriage to include same-sex couples have on marriage in this deinstitutionalization process?
It's hard to know, because you're, in some important ways, predicting what will happen in the future. My best judgment is that if we move toward a widespread adoption of a same-sex marriage, I believe the effect will be to significantly further and, in some respects, culminate the process of deinstitutionalization of marriage. If you take an institution that, for all of its long history, has been understood to have defined public purposes, and through changing its definition, you transfer it from the public, you transfer it from a child-centered public institution to an adult-centered private institution, a question of private ordering among couples, you have, in some ways, completed, there's a culminating trend toward the erasure of marriage's public defined contribution to society. And I think that it's likely that, that as I say, this did not trigger the trend of deinstitutionalization. Deinstitutionalization has been with us for a while now, but it's a live issue, and there are many people who would like to reverse the trend. But I think the evidence is quite compelling that if we move to a widespread adoption of same-sex marriage, we will very significantly accelerate the process of deinstitutionalization. And the consequence of that will be to weaken the role of marriage generally in society. And the consequences of that will be felt by everyone in the society.